Thanks to the folks who led the way. Thanks to the folks, let us thank them every day.
Inspirational live show dedicated to Dolores Huerta. She was the co-founder of the United Farm Workers Association and worked closely with Cesar Chavez to get that going. She's one of the most influential labor activists in the 20th century and a leader of the Chicano civil rights movement. Dolores' mom had 2 jobs and was bringing up 3 kids on her own, and her name was Alicia, and she was a community activist, and she had a lot of compassion for fellow workers, and her daughter kind of picked up on that and influenced her a lot. And later on, after living through some other childhood experiences that weren't all that pleasant, she picked up on that activism that she saw her mom involved with. One of the influencing things was when Dolores was a student, she was kind of discriminated against by this teacher who didn't particularly like Hispanic students. And she accused Dolores of cheating because her papers were too well written for a Hispanic student. Well, Dolores took quite a bit of insult, and that probably stuck with her the rest of her life and fed into this activism and what she was going to do to change things. Dolores, who was a teacher in the 1950s, I can imagine her kind of leading her students in song. Well, being a teacher wasn't quite going to be enough for Dolores. She saw so many hungry farm children that were coming to the school, and she thought she could do more to help them by organizing the farm workers. In the early 60s, she met up with Cesar Chavez, and they shared an interest in organizing the farm workers, and that's when they started the National Farm Workers Association, which later turned into the United Farm Workers Union. Dolores Huerta was one of the most significant driving forces behind the nationwide table grape boycott in the late 1960s, which led to successful union contracts by 1970. In 1973, she led another consumer boycott of grapes that resulted in the groundbreaking California Agriculture Labor Relations Act of 1975. This allowed farm workers to form unions and bargain for better wages and conditions. There were certainly a number of tough years there, as you can see, from the early 1960s right up until the mid-70s, of trying to get some rights for the farm workers in better conditions. She was such a strong organizer for labor and worked at it for so many years. She certainly deserves more credit than she's already received. She had a lot of confidence that as long as they kept working at it, and it took many years for them to get the rights for the farm workers, as we're going down the road, we can still feel pretty good if we know we're doing the right thing, and if we stick with it, we can bring about some change. Well, Dolores experienced a lot of rough times in her life. She was on the platform with Robert F. Kennedy when he was assassinated, and fortunately she wasn't injured. However, she was injured some 20 years later when she was protesting against some of the actions of George H.W. Bush, and she was beaten up quite badly by a police officer with a baton, and it caused significantly internal injuries to her and several broken ribs, and the injuries required the removal of her spleen. And to this day, she is still recovering from those injuries. She's 93 years old now, in this year 2023, and she still remains active, and she's the president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. The primary purpose of the foundation is the furtherance of women's rights, LGBTQ rights, immigrant rights, labor rights, and civil rights. So she remains to this day invested in all those things. I guess Dolores in her long life is held to the belief that if there's a will, there's a way. Thanks so much for everything you did.
If there's a will, there is a way.
there's a will, there is a way. If there's a will, there is a way. If there's a will, there is a way. If there's a will,